Hello, Aubrey. How are you today?
I'm great, Lindsay. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here. But I have an important IELTS question for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, Aubrey, what happens if an examiner interrupts a student during the speaking test?
Oh, great question. This could happen for a few reasons. It
Hmm.
might be that you have answered the question and continue speaking, and they need to cut you off to ask more questions. They have to
Hmm.
ask a certain amount of questions. You only have so much time. So if you have fully answered the question, then they might say thank you and just ask their next question. This is
Hmm.
interesting. Today, we're answering a question about another reason you might be interrupted, right, Lindsay?
Yeah, there's a few reasons you might be interrupted on
Yeah,
the speaking test. So, we want to go in there knowing what could happen. Right? The
right.
more we know, the better. And that's where we learn all about it here on IELTS Energy. So, what should our listeners do, Aubrey?
Be sure to hit follow right here on IELTS Energy. We have 2 episodes every week filled with strategies, vocabulary, everything you need to know on IELTS.
Yes, perfect. All right. Well, this question comes from our YouTube channel. Don't forget, guys, that we do have a YouTube channel for IELTS Energy. Just type that into the search bar in YouTube and hit subscribe. Shall I read the question?
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. This is from Mauro 9748. Hi, Aubrey and Jessica. If I start speaking, say IT jargon, can the examiner interrupt me and ask for the meaning of a term? For example, YAML, a restful service, or Scrum Master. Can it affect my score negatively? Awesome episode.
Nice. Thank you for the compliment on the episode. I love that they're
Yes.
on YouTube. Like you said, Lindsay, if you want to see a video of the podcast, go on over to YouTube. This
Hmm.
is a great question. And the answer is no. Examiners should not interrupt you to ask any clarification questions. They are not supposed to. So this probably won't happen. If they are, they're sort of breaking examiner rules. What they
Yes.
can and can't say is very restricted. And this is
Hmm.
one thing they can't do. They could not interrupt and say, "What does that mean, Scrum Master?"
Yeah, so I think the thing to remember here is this is not a conversation back and forth with the
Right.
examiner. That might be a rookie mistake, thinking it's a conversation, but it's not, right?
Exactly, right? What they can do is if you stop speaking and really haven't fully answered the question or need to speak more, maybe you haven't given the full 2 minutes in part two, they can give you a hand gesture. That means keep going, like a little
Mhm.
bit of like say more just with their hand, but they aren't
Okay.
supposed to say anything. If they
Interesting.
do interrupt you, it won't affect your score. If they're interrupting you, it's for what we said at the top of the episode because you have answered the question and they need to ask more questions. So, if anything, that shows how fluent you are. You could have kept going.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That means you can keep speaking for a long time and we don't lose points for that, right, Aubrey, when that happens?
Exactly. So, don't let
Okay.
it throw you off, right? If
Okay.
anything, feel like it's a compliment and just listen for the next question. Be ready to answer the next one.
All right. So that's the first question. But then the question, can we use specific jargon that the examiner might not understand? What do we think
Yeah.
about this, Aubrey?
Yeah. So, absolutely. Yes. Right. You can say, jargon about your industry, maybe medical terminology, things that are specific to your culture, but you definitely need to explain it so that the examiner knows that you know what you're talking about. They know you're not making a vocabulary error. If it's a word they may never have heard before,
Yeah.
and for all they know, you're making a mistake. So if you're going to
Oh,
say something like this, definitely explain what it means. If it's an acronym, share what it stands for. This is vital.
yes. And so our listener already gave some examples. So we're going to take a look at this idea of if we use acronyms for industries or jargon for our industry, right? Often there are questions
Exactly.
about our career, our work, our industry. So, how can we do that?
Yeah. So let's go through these 3 times where we might use something the examiner has never heard. The first one, industry specific jargon. What's an
Mhm.
example, Lindsay? What's something that we might say if we work in IT?
Okay, so just like our listener said, I don't know how to pronounce this to be
I'm
honest, but
guessing it's YAML, or maybe we say
YAML.
YAML. I'm not really
I don't
sure.
know. We don't know.
I'll say if I were the
Um,
examiner, if you say YAML, I would definitely need you to explain what that is. Or if you say
right.
YAML, I'd be like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, there could be some real misunderstandings going on here. So I'll just say I use YAML at work. That stands for yet another markup language. And it's for data serialization language that's used for writing configuration files. Wow.
Nice. I had to look that up because I hadn't heard this before. So if I were your examiner and you said YAML, for all I know, you're saying a different word in English, but your pronunciation is wrong or you're using the wrong word. So it would be vital that you say what it stands for, explain what it means. And these are difficult words. This is very, yeah, because it's sort of industry specific. you would need to know all of these words in English and be able to describe it. Otherwise, you would want to avoid saying that in the first place so that the examiner doesn't think you're making a mistake.
Yeah, we need to take the examiner along with us and make sure, even if you're using a perfectly legitimate acronym, they may not know about it. So that's the that person is the only person that matters in that moment, right?
Exactly.
And so
This would be
take them
vital to
along with
practice
you.
ahead of time, right?
Yes.
The industry specific jargon that you use at work, if you don't say it a lot in English, like this was difficult to say, data serialization language, make sure practice it in advance, right? And if you feel confident and you're saying it well, awesome. Say it on IELTS. If not, you don't have to talk about all of the jargon you use at work, right?
It's probably a good use of time to spend some time prepping to talk about what you do, because I imagine there are a lot of questions around career, work, things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And
Hmm.
in part one, you're guaranteed to be asked either about work or school or home or hometown. So
Yeah.
there's a good chance you'll get questions about that. So you should practice answering using this interesting vocabulary.
All right. So the other thing that might come up is medical jargon. If you're a doctor, a nurse practitioner, any kind of specialist,
Yeah.
medical jargon,
Or if
right?
something happens to you,
Oh,
right? Maybe you'll
yes.
say, as part of an IELTS speaking answer, I experienced an embolism last year. In case
Yeah.
you're not familiar, I wasn't before it happened to me. This is a blockage in a blood vessel. The doctor wasn't sure
Ah.
if it had been caused by a blood clot or an air bubble. So it's
Ooh.
interesting. If you're going to say embolism on IELTS, amazing, but not every examiner is going to be very familiar with all medical jargon. So you should explain it.
Very interesting, right? Again, take the examiner along with you, right? Don't expect them
Exactly.
to know all these very specific vocabulary words. Love it. Okay, and then we could get into talking about food, clothing, holidays, specific to maybe our country or culture, or another country or culture, right?
Exactly, right? And a lot of things that you maybe cook that you could
Mm-hmm.
talk about, you might only know how to say it in your first language, or maybe in English, we also say it that way. So here's a good example. My
Mm-hmm.
neighbor makes arroz con gandules, and it's
Mm-hmm.
super scrumptious. I could talk
Uh-huh.
about this on IELTS, but I would describe it. I would say it's rice with pigeon peas
Yeah.
and several spices, and it's a traditional dish in Puerto Rico where she's from. But I've never
Yes.
heard her say rice with pigeon peas. And when I say arroz con gandules, that's what I say too. A lot of people
Yeah.
do, right? It's
Yeah.
tricky where sometimes the examiner might be familiar with that. We say it in
Mm-hmm.
English, but they might
Mm-hmm.
not. So you still should describe what exactly it is.
And the other good thing about describing what something is it gives you an opportunity for a better vocabulary score if you can be very precise in the words you use. We can use high level vocabulary that the examiner would understand to describe this thing that they may not
Exactly.
know, right?
Yeah, the
Mhm.
examiner's going to be impressed if you know the word for pigeon peas. These kind of look like little beans, but
Yeah.
I didn't know at first until I looked up what arroz con gandules means. It's not super common in
Yeah.
foods in the US, right? So
Okay.
it's true. The more details you can provide, the more you're boosting your vocabulary score.
I love that idea. Aubrey, what is our takeaway on today's bonus episode? I mean, this has been a great one, a short
Yes.
episode, but very pinpointed to a specific skill here. Very important.
Absolutely, right? This was a really good question. You're thinking, whoever wrote this question in, you're clearly thinking
Mhm.
about what the examiner is thinking about, what is affecting your score. And that is what you should be thinking about, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that everything you're studying, what you're spending your time on is going to positively impact your score. And this is one of those things, right? Don't be stressed if the examiner interrupts you. That does not mean your score is going down. In fact, it might be that you're showing your fluency because they have to cut you off to ask the next question. You shouldn't have to expect them to, it would be very unlikely for them to interrupt you and ask a clarification question because they are specifically instructed not to.
So good to know these little insider things that maybe not every student would know
Right.
if you're not working with people that are connected to the exam. So this is huge for our listeners. And I love the takeaway here of spend your time on the thing that is going to get you the most leverage. Like this idea of talking about your career. You're very likely to be asked that question, some kind of question. So spend time getting used to talking about what you do for work.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And yes, use this specific jargon. It will boost your vocabulary score. But if there's a chance there's a word or an acronym the examiner won't be familiar with, definitely describe it. Let them know what the acronym stands for. Describe how you use it at work.
All right. Great stuff today, Aubrey. Well, I'll see you back here very soon.
Awesome. See you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.